name's Thomas Elmer. I'm Chair of the Historic Preservation Council, and I'm calling the October 6, 2021 Historic Preservation Council meeting to order. With me this morning are the following council members: Beth Ackley, Beth Burgess, Paul Butkus, Marguerite Carnell, myself, Margaret Faber, Leah Glazer, Christine Nelson, Sarah Nelson, Sarah Sportman, Walter Woodward, and Ellen Zappo. Jonathan, do you see all of those? Because maybe I should have taken a roll call.
We should do that, yes.
Okay. So we'll back up and do a roll call. Beth Ackley?
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Beth Burgess?
Here, Tom.
Paul Butkus?
Here.
Margaret Carnell?
Morning, Tom.
Good morning. Margaret Faber?
I'm here.
Leah Glazer? Christine Nelson? Christine did say she would be with us today. Sarah Nelson?
Present.
Sarah Sportman?
I'm here.
Walter Woodward?
Here.
And Ellen Zappo.
I don't see Ellen.
3 non-responses, but we have a quorum, so we'll get started.
Okay.
The following is the Historic Preservation Council's format and review of public comment procedures. Given the online format of today's meeting, and for those who are visiting today, I want to review and explain our procedures. I will read each motion and ask for the motion to be moved and seconded. Staff will present the agenda item to the council. Council members will have an opportunity to ask questions. If called upon by staff, a representative of the organization may offer statements or address council's questions. For members of the public who wish to speak to the agenda item, we ask that you identify yourself and your affiliation. After all questions have been addressed and statements made, a roll call vote by council will be taken. If members of the public have letters and/or written statements they wish to submit to the record, please email them to Jonathan Kinney at ct.gov, and that is JONATHAN.KINNEY@ct.gov. The Historic Preservation Council takes statements from members of the public but does not respond to questions. Lastly, please only address the particular agenda item being addressed at that time. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's policy regarding conflict of interest. The Historic Preservation Council votes on matters which provide leadership, service, and economic benefit to property owners, consultants, local governments, and not-for-profit organizations. Given this responsibility and to maintain the highest professional standards in the discharge of our duties, it is important to maintain a strong code of ethics for all council members and department employees. In order to avoid possible violations of the Department of Economic and Community Development ethics statement, it is necessary for the council to be aware of any situations in which there is a real, potential, or apparent conflict of interest involving anyone here. A conflict of interest may occur when a public official's participation in agency matters results in personal financial gain. All council and staff have been provided a copy of the Department of Economic and Community Development ethics statement and governing state statutes. Having reviewed them and today's agenda, members of council and staff are now asked to disclose any affiliation with entities or projects that may create a conflict of interest as defined by agency policy and pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-79 through 1-89, entitled Code of Ethics for Public Officials. Once disclosed, the member or staff may recuse themselves from that particular agenda item. Having read this statement, are there any council members or staff members that would like to disclose a conflict of interest to any of the items on today's agenda? Okay. Sounds great. First item on the agenda are the meeting minutes from the September 1st meeting. Meeting minutes have been provided to council members in Dropbox. I'm hoping everybody has had a chance to review them. Are there any questions or comments or changes that need to be made to the minutes? I submitted a few minor ones to Jonathan. Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes as noted?
This is Sarah Nelson. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented and with the corrections that you noted.
Thank you. Second?
Margaret, second.
Thank you, Margaret. I have a motion to approve the minutes. I'll take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
Hang on a second. I will abstain. Margaret Faber?
Abstain, I was absent.
Abstain. Thank you. Is Leah with us?
Yeah, I just got here. So should I vote if I looked at them or if I wasn't here for whatever changes you made, or what should I do?
The changes were very minor that I sent.
Okay. All right, then aye.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Is Christine Nelson with us? Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
I'll abstain. I was absent.
Okay. Walter Woodward?
Aye.
And Ellen Zappo?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Jonathan, would you reach out to Christine because she needs to be here today?
Absolutely.
Thank you. She told me she would be in attendance, so I just want to make sure everything's okay. The first item on the agenda today is unfinished action from previous meetings. Item 5A1, HRF grant, Thomaston Opera House, Thomaston, Connecticut. This item was tabled at our July 7th, 2021 meeting per council's request for additional information. It was brought up and tabled at our August 4th, 2021 meeting, and again at our September 1st, 2021 meeting to give the applicant additional time to gather council's requested information. The applicant has submitted additional information, and staff and the applicant would like to proceed with the new information that has been provided. The grant funding request remains the same. By a 2/3 vote, we can recall this item to the table. Is there a motion to recall the item to the table?
This is Sarah Nelson. I make a motion to recall to the table.
Marguerite, second.
Take a roll call vote for this. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Cornell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Leah Glazer.
Aye.
Jonathan, any luck with Christine? Can't hear you, Jonathan.
Sorry, I'm muted. I have not heard anything yet. I will let you know when I hear.
Thank you. Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, very good. We have a 2/3 majority. I'll read the original motion to remind you what it says. The motion is on the table. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a Historic Restoration Fund grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, the Thomaston Opera House project, removal of 6 failing, 2 beyond repair R-22 condenser units with all their line sets and evaporator coils and replacement with an eco-friendly system, including new condensate drains and pans. So with that, Aaron?
Thank you. The council requested more information about the system and installation. The town's maintenance coordinator couldn't attend this meeting due to an issue that arose this morning from the failing system. Since the July meeting, he has worked to create a request for proposals outlining the scope of work with more specificity. He worked with various HVAC professionals to familiarize himself with the process. He is confident that this RFP will solicit the bids he's looking for, and he will be able to properly manage the project. It has become an urgent need, and I believe State Representative John Piscopo joined us by phone to voice his support for this project and the town's ability to complete it properly.
Great, thank you. Sarah Nelson, may I ask you to lead the discussion for this as the spokesperson for our small subcommittee?
Sure. So just as a reminder, Leah and Beth and Tom and I were on a subcommittee for HRF application reviews, and this Thomaston Opera House was one of the applications that we did review. And the entire subcommittee would like to thank the town and the staff for taking the time to put together a more complete description of the project. That all will help things go more smoothly from a bidding size. And so thank you all. There were a couple of questions brought up by the language, and this is not to say that this is not an approvable project, but it's clarification. So Aaron, pardon me. One of the things that the application spoke about was the replacement of the rubber roof by others. And I wanted to just double check that rubber roof is not couldn't be part of this project as well.
Correct. That's a separate project that they will fund on their own.
Okay. Okay. And then the other question that I had when I was looking at it was that there are many levels of efficiency called SEER rating for condensing units. And the higher the rating, initially the installation cost is higher, but at the back end, the maintenance costs, the operational cost is lower. And I didn't see any specification for what SEER rating they were looking for, and it might be that they're asking for one level as a base that everybody is bidding on, and then a more efficient level they're asking for as an alternate to see what the cost would be. But I feel like that would strengthen their application.
Great, thank you. I will suggest that they add a base and ask for what the contractor would do specifically.
So SEER is capital SEER, so Seasonal Energy Efficiency Recovery, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and the key thing about what Sarah just said is they cost more up front, but it's cheaper in the long run to run and maintain.
I'll let them know.
Sorry, Sarah.
No, thank you, Tom, for clarifying that. And Leah, I didn't have an opportunity to fold in any comments that you might have had, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to add anything as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I'm good with it.
Okay. And Tom, I'm assuming you are as well?
I am, yes.
Okay, all right. So with that, the subcommittee would vote to the council membership as a whole to recommend funding.
Great. Are there any questions or comments, concerns from other council members? Okay. So with that, we'll take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley, and this is to approve the grant with the additional materials submitted. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Leah Glazer.
Aye.
I'm assuming Christine's not here. Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward,
Aye.
Ellen Zappo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for getting that additional information. Okay. Next item on the agenda is under new action items, 5B1. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award an institutional support for capacity building grant, formerly basic operational support grant, to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Applicant, Hartford Preservation Alliance. Project, 2-year support. Grant amount, $83,640. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
Moved, Margaret. Seconded, Beth Burgess.
Thank you, Beth.
Okay.
Okay, and a discussion.
Okay, so this is Mary. Good morning, everybody. Staff recommends approval of this grant. As you know, last meeting, we awarded an institutional support for capacity building grant to New London Landmarks. We have 2 more on this agenda today, and those are the only ones I actually anticipate getting in the near future. So Hartford Preservation Alliance has been a grant recipient under this program for several years, probably over a decade. As we discussed at the last meeting, these grants are very important to help support our local preservation partners because it's especially in these larger cities, it's really helpful to us to get a bead on preservation issues, as soon as possible and offer any support we can. So the ISCB grant provides basic operational cost reimbursement to allow the staff and volunteers to concentrate on their programming and their advocacy. And Mary Falvey is here representing the application. If you have any questions that I can't answer.
Any questions from council members? No? Okay, hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
thank you, Leah. Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward,
Aye.
Ellen Zappo.
Aye.
Very good, motion carries.
Thank you.
This is Sarah. Sarah Nelson. I just wanted to recognize this application as being very clearly put together and very easy to review, and commend Hartford Preservation Alliance for that.
I concur.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to the council for approval.
The next item on the agenda is 5B2. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award an institutional support for capacity building grant, formerly basic operational support grant, to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. The applicant, New Haven Preservation Trust, project, 2-year support, grant amount $100,000. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
This is Sarah Nelson, so moved.
I'll second Leah Glazer.
Thank you, Leah. And Mary?
Okay, so staff also recommends approval of this application. New Haven Preservation Trust has also been a recipient of this grant for close to 15 years, I think, since we began this program shortly after CIA was enacted. And again, they provide invaluable boots on the ground information and assistance to us in our efforts. And here at the meeting are Susan Godshaw, Rona Johnston, who's the president of NHPT, Glenn Trunkfield, and I think Elizabeth Holt, who are here to happily answer any questions or comments that I cannot.
Great. Any questions from council members? Okay, hearing none. We'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Margaret Cornell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward,
Aye.
Ellen Zappo.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 5B3. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a surveying and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. Applicant, Mather Homestead Foundation. Project, consulting services of a CFR qualified architect and appropriate team to prepare a condition assessment of the Mather Homestead 1778 located at 219 Stephen Mather Road in Darien, Connecticut. Grant amount of $20,000. Is there a motion to move this to the table for discussion?
I'll move, Margaret.
Second, Sarah Nelson.
Okay, and a discussion from staff?
Okay, so staff recommends approval of this application. As you read, this is an important house on very large grounds. They are asking for a condition assessment, which may not be able to cover everything. They're in the middle of a strategic plan to decide what, if anything, they might want to do differently with the homestead itself. Currently, their plans are to maintain it as a house museum. I believe they have a resident on the grounds, and it's their newly built education center is where they have most of their programming. So a condition assessment may have to take into account future different uses for the house, but at this point in time, they really want to use it as an educational tool for tours and not like extensive public programming that might necessitate significant changes. They do have a large landscape, which they will probably want to explore and investigate uses for under a separate report. There are some existing drawings from the early to mid 20th century that were done, I believe, when a porch was put on the property. This is a National Historic Landmark, very important to the town itself. So we do support this effort. And I believe Diane Boston is here from the Mather Homestead Foundation to answer any questions that I can't.
Questions from council members?
Yes. Hi, Mary. It's Beth Burgess.
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to verify, they are seeking the condition assessment. There was a mention of also drawings under the project deliverable section.
Okay.
So I just want to be sure or clear on that. 20,000 might not get you both of those things.
I mean, there are existing drawings, but they're from almost 100 years ago. And so we did mention to them that this report might require like measured drawings. And yes, this is a non-matching grant because this came in prior to the deadline. They are, I did inquire as to whether they could make up the difference. And Diane may be able to answer this because I think at the time they were still investigating that. Right. But they are aware that 20,000 may not be enough to cover this cost. And so they will need to figure out how to make that difference.
Thank you.
Can we get an answer from that question from the guest, please?
Is Diane on? I think she is. I thought I saw her.
Yeah, she is on.
Oh, okay.
Did you see her on the list?
Okay.
I can.
Diane Boston, can you hear us?
I think she might be on mute.
It's not showing that she is. Let me see.
So while we're trying to get in touch with Diane, are there other questions from council members?
I had a question. Beth Ackley. Hi, Mary. I'm looking at the aerial photo that was provided, and I see the house on the sort of the top left corner, and it looks like the visitor center is in the bottom right corner, maybe, and that's newer.
Yes.
Are there any other historic buildings on the property, and if there are they part of the assessment at all?
There is the cottage, which I believe is currently occupied by a resident caretaker.
Okay.
And I believe that would, I mean, the barn is a newer structure. I mean, it's a barn-like structure, so
Yeah.
that would not be included, but the cottage would be. We would take a look at the nomination to see what significance that bears, you know, whether it's original to the house or whether it came at a later date, but yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Paul, you had a question?
Yes, I was thinking it would be helpful when they actually do go out to issue the RFP, that the wording be very clear to say that they have, you know, $20,000 to perform a study, and that there's a wish list, but not everything may be accommodated, because many times these RFPs go out and they include everything that's on the list, and you're discouraging people from even responding, because the wish list exceeds vastly what the available funds are for. So I think it'd be helpful to be very clear on all of these kind of assessment grants, that we have a limited amount of funds, or we know that this is only contributing a portion of a much greater effort. So each respondent can say, well, this is what we can do based on our interpretation of what you're explaining your needs are. Because it may be that, you know, documenting the building to the nth degree is not really what they're interested in, but they're looking at a 5 or 10-year plan of action for the property, and maybe subsequent periods that, you know, having measured drawings of the building are not really what is needed at this phase. If that's the case, that we're just trying to do a documentation project, I think that would be something totally separate and have a different description in that RFP.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. And sometimes we, when it does look like the scope is going to exceed the amount of funding that the grantee has, we might do, you know, adults and just kind of so that they can compare apples and apples when they get their bids. But we'll, I can.
This is Diane. I think I was able to call in by phone. Yay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Very good. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the thoughtful comments. Really appreciate it. And the most recent comment, I think that's really important. I think we're a new organization and really just trying to figure out what our needs are. But I do think that we probably are looking for a lot more assessment than this grant will cover. But I think that
a careful study. I think maybe our RFP having add-ons could be really helpful for us to understand what the costs of all these different goals of ours are in terms of assessing and surveying the property. I do think it was mentioned earlier that the landscape would be looked at separately. I mean, we were sort of in the hope that this would provide us with sort of some yardsticks by which we could understand maintenance needs for both the house and the property, but also kind of help us with broader planning. And again, that may be just more than the scope would allow. So some for guidance from you all in terms of how this money could best be used to both understand how we can best preserve the building, but also support our future goals and for use of the property. That would be helpful. So to your suggestion, and in addition, it appears that in 2022 our foundation will have some funds to support this work to add on to ours. I don't have an exact number per se. I think it depends on what comes back from the consultants in terms of what we're able to get for what costs. And then I think we would evaluate as an organization how we might contribute as well towards the bigger goals.
Great, thank you, Diane. Are there other questions from council members?
I don't have a question. One more comment, Tom, because I have to. It was very well written narrative. Thank you for that. I would urge in future applications, if possible, to add some more diversity to your history. If possible, it was very focused on a white male perspective, and I understand that's where a lot of Connecticut history is coming from. So I just urge in future applications, if there's a little bit more research or even something else about women and or diverse populations in the area, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And as we are, especially getting updates to research, but also just in this case, it's good for the council to have a broader perspective of of the significance or the historical significance of the resource.
Yeah, and I'm just add one comment. I think it was in the application. Bertha Mather, the daughter of Stephen Mather, is a really important figure in our town, and I think we're starting to realize that her value and importance as a historic figure in our community is equally important to Stephen Mather's value. So, as our understanding of the family and the value unfolds, I think that's certainly the case. So, thank you for that.
Mary, I had one overriding or overarching comment on the application. On page 3 of 6, item 1, a brief description, it says a condition assessment to investigate structural, mechanical, and architectural elements. And then on page 5, project deliverables, talks about existing building and site drawings, property and building conditions, prioritize list to maintain the homestead, and then a 5 to 10 year master plan. To me, that's a significant disconnect. And the RFP needs to be a whole lot clearer than that. Otherwise, you're going to get respondents all over the place.
Or not at all.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. When we do have discussions, especially at the very pre-planning, like feasibility studies and conditions assessment, we do talk about, the broad universe of what's possible and what could go in. But then you're correct. Once we start talking about budget and even just planning, we need to help the applicant, narrow the scope to what's feasible and reasonable under a single project. And then hopefully they'll come back for subsequent grants for additional information as needed. But I think under this grant, they're concerned about the current condition and how to remedy any capital issues. But then obviously concurrent with their strategic planning, they may in the future require additional investigations.
So my concern, and Paul didn't say it, though he was alluding to it, my concern is that they get a consultant for $20,000 for X, Y, and Z, and it's so watered down because they've tapped into all the different aspects listed here that it's of no value because the detail's not there. So And I know we've talked about this over and over. And I think this is a really good application to bring it back to the table for discussion.
Exactly. And that is, we would definitely, as we work on the RFP, drill down to exactly what they could expect, and then what their first priority should be.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Are there any other questions from council members? All right. We have a motion on the table to approve the grant. I'll take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Margaret Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward,
Aye.
Ellen Zappo. All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Jonathan, I'm getting some real urgency on Christine because
Okay.
this would be her third missed meeting, which makes her voluntarily stepping off the council. So if we can find her,
I will.
I would appreciate it.
Yep, I emailed and texted. I will try giving her a call right now. I'm just going to put myself on mute.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck. The next item on the agenda is item 5B4. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act. Funded by the Community Investment Act. So can we please put our systems on mute? Funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Town of Sherman. Project, consulting services of a CFR qualified architect and appropriate team to prepare plans and specifications to support the restoration of the Scout House circa 1827, located at 9 Route 39 North, Sherman, Connecticut. Grant amount $20,000. May I have a motion to move this to the table for discussion?
Marguerite.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'll give that to Marguerite Carnell, and the second voice there?
That was Margaret.
That,
Oh, or someone else. It's just Savannah.
there were many voices. Give it to
Well, you guys have no idea what that does to me. Item for discussion, Mary?
Okay. So staff recommends approval of this application. Just a few notes. They are looking for architectural plans and specifications based on a general report that was done in 2016, which estimated costs of about $30,000, not including electrical and fire safety. And as we all know, through cost escalations, I did ask them whether they would be prepared to make up any difference in pre-development costs that might incur, and they are prepared. This is a non-matching grant. They are prepared to make up any difference. It's a very simple building. It's basically one room and then two back rooms. There are no existing drawings except for maybe something in the capital needs assessment. And they do plan to use the building as is, with no, or they don't have any plans to change the programming. So we think this is a fairly straightforward plans and specs job, but I certainly welcome any advice or information from the council. I believe Don Lowe is here from the town.
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
To clarify.
Thank you, Mary.
So.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Questions from council members?
I'll jump in again. It's the same thing. If it really is maintaining of the existing use, they want to add bathroom facilities, possibly, I think it just should be very clear rather than kind of a study of what can be done. It's really, this is our program. We'd like to do these specific things. We either have $20,000 or it's a partially funded through the state, but be very clear about saying this is what we want to do. We want to have plans and specs for this limited amount of scope and get the proposals based on that level of work. It just makes it a lot clearer to get a good response from whoever was going to submit on this RFP.
Yes, again, yeah, that's again excellent advice, and which we do take. When we do help draft the RFP, we make sure that the organization gives an introduction to who they are, what their vision and mission is, and also a lot about the resource itself and what their current and possibly future plans are for it. But yeah, clarity is key to, especially just to make sure that if and when they do get bids, they're looking at similar proposals across the board. So yes, yeah.
Right, because you're on a septic system in this location, so whether it could tie into an existing septic tank or if we have to do a completely different thing, there goes your entire budget. So
Right.
that if that's really a priority, be very clear about it, and we'll get the project actually to a level where they can actually go out and get bids for construction, because you're asking really for construction documents at this point,
Right.
because it's a very limited scope.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Do you have any other questions, Paul, or comments?
I think that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council members?
I had a comment about the long-range preservation plan, Mary. It's Beth Burgess, sorry. Just it's non-existent, basically. So I would hope that there could be some work addressing or compiling a list, understanding that it's a town property and one of many, I'm sure. Something that they could grab from this information, from these new plans and specifications, but also taking from the 2016 report and start there for future applications, particularly. Yeah.
Exactly. And the 2016 report, I mean, that was 5 years ago. And so a lot, costs have certainly changed. And obviously it was 5 years ago. So the building itself, and I think the town is well aware of that, which is why I think they're anxious to dig in. And it may be that they can only address one major thing at a time, but we can work with them on that.
Cool. Understood. Thank you.
Mary, I have a question for Donald. Donald, if we approve this and you are able to expedite the bidding process, when would you like to get your drawings done and go out to bid?
I think we'd like to go out to bid late winter, early spring, or actually over the winter, so that we could do this work in the spring.
Okay.
But
I think that given the size of the building,
I think that's realistic. I think all in all. So thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Sarah Nelson, do you have any thoughts or comments?
And nothing beyond what's already been mentioned.
Okay, great. I see Beth Ackley's hand is up.
Yes, hi. I was wondering, I see in the issues to be addressed, I see something about drainage. Where was that? Roof plaster. Building has drainage issues and needs gutters. Am I reading that the water is coming off of the building, or is that site drainage that's an issue? Yeah.
Hi, if it's okay, Mary, I'll address that.
Please.
And it's water coming off of the building.
Okay.
there isn't drainage issues on the grounds itself. No.
Okay, okay, great. So I would just recommend when you are preparing your RFP that you mentioned that both an architect and a structural engineer will be needed for your consultants on this one.
Well, okay, great. Yep.
Because it sounds like you've got some sill issues, and sometimes when you have sill issues, there's, you know, it gets into the studs and that sort of thing, or and the posts. So
Actually, that's exactly what we're concerned about. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
no problem.
And you may need a civil to deal with the septic issue if you're adding bathrooms.
I'm not sure. I can't remember what we wrote on this, but I don't think we're going to be putting in a water or or bathroom or anything in this building.
Okay, it was mentioned that there are no facilities in there, and with the Girl Scouts working there, it was also kind of might have been in one of the letters of support, but it was definitely something that's been raised as an issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that, you know what, I didn't read all of the letters of support. Maybe they said something, but it was not our intention to change the building in any way and believe it or not, we were not going, there's a bathroom right across the road in the theater, and then there's also bathroom facilities in town hall, and all of this is part of the same campus. So our idea was to keep this pretty simple and keep the building really exactly like it is. It just needs some, you know, structural repair, kind of much like what was pointed out previously.
Any other questions from council members? All right, hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Budkitz?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
Ellen Zoppo? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Next item on the agenda is 5B5. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend the award of a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. The applicant, Lime Art Association, project, consulting services of a CFR qualified architect to prepare plans and specifications for energy efficiency measures for the organization's 1921 building located at 90 Lime Street in Old Lyme, Connecticut. Grant amount, $20,000. May I have a motion to move this to the table for discussion?
Aye.
So moved, Sarah.
And a second, Paul?
Paul, yes.
Who was the first?
Sarah Nelson?
Okay. Thank you.
And the discussion, Mary.
So staff recommends approval of this application. We did recently fund an energy efficiency feasibility study, which was included in the Dropbox. They did competitively select the architect, so they will be moving forward if they're awarded this grant to start doing the plans and specifications. The first report covers a number of issues to address energy efficiency, but they are this particular set of plans is going to hone in on the skylights, most of which are original, and the ley lights, none of which are original. We have been in ongoing talks with Lime Art Association, both regarding the feasibility study and just making sure that the plans and specifications that are developed do need to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, or they won't be reimbursed. They do have a budget of $31,000, even though this is a non-matching grant. They're obviously going to make up the difference of 11,000 over the 20 if they're awarded. And I believe both Elspeth Dowd and Lori Pavlos are here from Lime Art Association to answer any questions or concerns that you might have that I can't address.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Questions from council members?
I have a question for Mary. Just in rough ballpark numbers, what was the cost for the feasibility study?
That came in under $20,000. I think it was 17.
Okay. And did they have to recreate all of the drawings, from scratch? Just as something to kind of have as a ballpark, because
Like as a
they're
benchmark?
outlining, $1.2 million worth of work outlined in that project, and I think a lot of times there's a perception that type of report is what everybody wants, because it has the plans, it has an analysis, it has multiple options and costing and all of these things. So it's sometimes helpful to see when we're formulating these things or reviewing them, kind of what those ballparks are.
Well, exactly, and I've had, and I hope to have more discussions with council members, especially, so that I can get your good advice and professional expertise regarding, what an appropriate pre-development cost might be based on a projected construction cost. I know that prices are just all over the place right now. This particular budget is based on the architect's proposal, so I think I'm confident in this particular section. They do plan to come back to address other issues that were investigated in the report. But yes, that is an ongoing, not struggle, but for me, it's an ongoing learning process, I guess, about how to accurately, just for the benefit, so that I can speak to grantees knowledgeably about what they should expect from the report and what a report should cost. And so I look forward to future help with that, or conversations.
So for this grant application, it's for one portion of that feasibility study. It's not the entire thing.
Oh yeah, no. It's yeah. I think they
just the skylights.
Yeah, no, I think they phased out what they plan to do in the future, but this one is addressing the skylights and lay lights and possibly insulation. So.
And this is Sarah, Paul, to partially answer what I think you were alluding to. I wasn't aware, I've not been involved with the Lime Art Association, but I am aware that other firms have been. So I believe that there has been a repository of information like elevations and plans that were at the ready for the consultants when they started their work.
Yes, I apologize for that. They did do, Centerbrook did some work about, I want to say 10 years ago. So they do have at least some drawings existing.
I see Lori's hand up. Yes, Lori.
Yes, hi, I'm Lori Pavlos. I'm the Executive Director of the Association. So in 2013, that's right, Mary, Centerbrook Architects did a conditions assessment study, and it was pretty extensive. And Point One was able to use the drawings that were generated during that study. So yeah, this has been an ongoing understanding of what it takes for us to secure the future of this 100-year-old building. And we are only doing 1/3 of the projects that are outlined in the feasibility study: the skylights, the lay lights, and the insulation in the ceiling.
May I ask a question? Beth Burgess, sorry. I am unclear as to which option within the feasibility study for those 3 items that you just spoke about: skylights, the lay lights, and the insulation. There's multiple options, right? So which one are you going with?
So there's a letter that's included in the back of the feasibility study dated February 18th from Point One that recommended the options. So that for the skylights, lay lights, and roof and attic insulation, they've recommended the installing low profile, so removing existing skylight frames and roofing, installing low profile sloped aluminum glazing system to match historic profile, and flash and re-roof the building. And then for the lay lights, they recommend replacing the existing lay light sheets with custom sized CalWall insulated translucent panels. So they have specified.
Okay, I see that now.
Yeah.
So I see. Okay. Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we generally just like to see one option that meets the standards, although it is, I guess for education purposes, for the organization, it's always interesting to see what else. But in our discussions, we've been clear about work that, especially if they plan to go forward with a tax credit application or an HRF grant application, what's produced needs to be in compliance with standards.
And Mary, along those lines, if the CalWall product is the best for the insulation value, the discussion was the original lay lights were stretched fabric. Potentially, the visible surface, if they can replicate that stretched fabric with the CalWall directly above it, you achieve the insulation properties, but then you get the original aesthetic of the stretched fabric.
Exactly. The lay lights, are not original, but the muslin canvas sounds like it was very distinctive architecturally. Obviously, it is the visible portion within the gallery space. So that's something that the architect can consider.
Beth, I see your hand up.
Yes. I'm going to just quickly shift the conversation to the insulation. And I see in the feasibility study, well, I see that cellulose was chosen as the preferred method. And I always, not alarm bells, but, caution things about when we're changing the insulation in a building to start looking at the building science aspect to make sure that we're not trapping moisture in any way. And I do see in the cons requires thorough evaluation to determine dew point and possible moisture and mold risk. So I would just strongly suggest that that's included in the RFP as a work item to fully evaluate that and make sure that we're not causing any harm to the framing.
Definitely.
Yeah, because in 20 years, if they do it wrong, in 20 years, you're going to have a big problem on your hands.
Right.
Good point, Beth. Any other questions or comments from council members? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
Ellen Zappo?
Aye.
And Jonathan, is Christine with us? No?
She is attempting to call in right now, Tom. She's having trouble accessing Teams for some reason.
Okay, we will keep moving.
Yep.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is item 6B1, State Register of Historic Places nomination. Nomination for 515 Stilson Road, Fairfield, to the State Register of Historic Places. The Historic Preservation Council votes to list 515 Stilson Road, Fairfield, to the State Register of Historic Places. May I have a motion to move this to the table for discussion?
Marguerite, so moved.
Seconded, Christine.
Thanks, Christine.
You're welcome.
All right, and a discussion from staff.
Yes, thank you. This is Marina Wisniewski. Staff recommends approval of listing of the Caroline and Walker Sherwood House located at 515 Stilson Road, Fairfield, under Criterion 1 at the local level as an example of an early farmhouse, one of the last from the Stratfield area, which remained in operation until 1956. It is also significant under Criterion 2 at the local level as a well-preserved example of a vernacular farmhouse exhibiting stylistic elements from its construction through the early 20th century. Alterations have been minimal, the most obvious being the change in setting following the subdivision of the farm. However, it retains its integrity of location, design, majority of materials and workmanship, feeling, and association with the area as it developed. I've received 7 letters of support. I received an additional one on Monday, so it was not able to make it into the Dropbox. However, I can read it into the record if the council would like.
Sure.
Okay.
As long as it's multiple pages.
No, it's just 2 paragraphs. Okay. I'm writing in support of adding 515 Stilson Road, Fairfield, Connecticut to the State Registry of Historic Places. I have lived across the street from the property for the past 31 years and have had the pleasure of looking at the farmhouse on a daily basis. One of the features that has struck me most over the years is the front porch. I have imagined the residents from the past 2 centuries sitting there and greeting or waving to the passersby on foot, horse, carriage, bicycle, or automobile. In the current fast-paced world, it is a reminder of simpler times. The current owners, Darren and Andy, have obviously put a tremendous amount of effort into preserving and restoring this home to maintain its treasured history. I believe that is important to preserve the historic and architectural significance of 515 Stilson Road, Fairfield, Connecticut, and sincerely hope that you will approve the nomination to add the property to the State Registry of Historic Places. Best, Loretta Gorman, 502 Stilson Road.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions? Yes, Beth.
I don't actually have a question. I was just gesturing.
Well then, hi. Any other council members? Paul, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just hoping that there's some way we can get a little bit better floor plan to include in the final nomination papers.
Sure, I can include that. Also, Darren Raymond Locke, Dr. Darren Raymond Locke, who is both owner and author of the nomination. I'm not sure if she's on the line, but her husband, Andrew, or Andy, apparently may be. So just in case, there's anything that he can help answer.
We are here. This is Darren and Andy.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Great. Any other questions from council members? I have one comment. As a historical landscape architect, I would really like to see more information on the landscape features. You mentioned the mature trees. It would be interesting to go do a width DBH on those trees and the specimens, and just give us something on the landscape. If it's historic and the property is only a piece of its original, you've stated that. But I'd like to see some of the information, historic extant features of the landscape put into the nomination.
Sure.
Sure, that's not a problem. There are 2 mature trees. We're in the process of having them inspected by an arborist because they took very, very bad hits in the last couple of storms. There's one in the back of my neighbor's property, which is at the corner confluence of 4 of the parcels, mine included. It's about 200-year-old sugar maple. It is substantially cracked through the center and is rotting, it looks like. So we're doing our best working with our neighbors to try to see if that tree can be saved. And if it can, we're all in agreement that it should be. The maple in the front of our house is about 150 years old and also took substantial damage in the last 2 storms. And unfortunately, it's looking like that tree cannot be saved, but we're still in discussions. But I can certainly add some discussion of that in.
Great, thank you. So we're not supposed to give suggestions or recommendations here, but as a historical landscape architect, I can't resist based on what you just said. I highly recommend you be proactive and take those trees down before they come down by themselves and cause architectural damage.
Absolutely. We've already trimmed the tree that we're responsible for substantially. We're just waiting for the letter just to have it in our system and get it scheduled. That sugar maple in the front is likely just gone. The other one, since it's, I'd say 85% on my neighbor's property, I have just been trying to work with her to make sure that we're getting the tree assessed and protecting the house. There's a huge limb that's hanging over our property. It's not near the house, so I'm not concerned. That broke in the last storm. So we're doing the best we can. Obviously, we would like to replant in the front because now if that tree comes down in the front, we're the only ones that don't have mature planting in the front of the house. So to maintain the streetscape, we will be, putting back a tree that will become mature vegetation. But past that, I don't know what else I can offer. Let me know.
No, that's very valid. One of the things that's I received a paper recently from a friend about preservation of historic trees. Vegetation has a lifespan. So hopefully you'll replace that maple with another long-lived big tree versus a dogwood. That the next generation can appreciate the tree.
We were looking at London plane trees potentially because one of the trees is suffering from verticillium. So we need a tree that is not only resilient to that, but also one that can deal with any salt spray coming off the road. So I've been proactive in trying to consider all the options before we make a final decision.
Sounds great. You're on it. Leah, yes.
Yeah, so I was just looking, first of all, concur with what you said, Tom, about the trees, but I'm looking at the criteria one, and I think it's a good history. It's just very, very specific to the property. So I was just wondering if there could be just zoom out a little for a little bit more context about what put this local history in a greater context about what's going on in the state and the country at the time, just generally economically and politically. It's just kind of floating out there in the historical wilderness. And then just a tiny little thing, there's like a weird question mark under Troop of Dragoons. I don't know if that's a typo or.
That's a typo. I saw that this morning.
Okay.
There was I was switching between computer systems, and I think there was a reading issue with going between Word, whatever else I was using. So I have already marked that to fix it.
Okay, yeah, that happens to me all the time. But yeah, just like I don't know Stratford and Fairfield, just a little bit about what greater context all this is happening in, that when this house was built, what else was happening.
Understood. Thank you.
Beth, your hand's up.
Yes, for real this time. Just a quick question of curiosity. So the eastern wing was the original. So it was originally a front entry or a side gable entry or an end gable entry? Is there evidence of the original door?
To be honest with you, I am not sure that it was road facing. I get the feeling, based on various things, that it might have been not front gable entry, but I am not sure 100%.
It doesn't look like there's a ton of evidence of the 1820 architecture inside, that it was a pretty thorough renovation, maybe.
Upstairs and in the attic, it certainly is intact. The doors are all there. The floorboards are there. The hand-hewn beams are there. There's all the framing you can see upstairs in the attic, all the common rafters, all of that's intact. Upstairs, the layout, I think, is pretty good on the first floor. The thing that altered on the first floor was mainly the floorboards, but it is very possible the original floorboards are intact under the early 20th century hardwood.
And the stairs
then-
must have been changed too, right?
The stairs were, yes, the stairs were changed. I can see the scarring from where the stairs originally were in my bedroom upstairs.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions from council members? Okay, hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Christine Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
Sarah Sportman,
Aye.
Walter Woodward,
Aye.
Ellen Zappo.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Next item on the agenda is 6B2, nomination for the Henry E. Russell House located at 101 Ocean Avenue, New London, to the State Register of Historic Places. The Historic Preservation Council votes to list the Henry E. Russell House located at 1001 Ocean Avenue, New London, to the State Register of Historic Places. Is there a motion to move this to the table for discussion?
Paul, I'll move.
Thank you, Paul. And a second?
I'll second. Ellen Zappo.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, and a discussion from staff.
Great, thank you. Staff recommends approval of listing of the Henry E. Russell House located at 1001 Ocean Avenue, New London, under Criterion 1 at the local level as an example of a large estate commissioned by a prominent industrialist and designed by a well-known and well-regarded architect, aiding in the development of Ocean Avenue in New London. There have been alterations to the original structure, including an addition to the rear and infill within the portico. Despite these changes, the house retains its integrity of location, design, majority of materials and workmanship, feeling, and association. Also of note, the house suffered a fire in 2021. However, as noted in the nomination, the majority of damage was restricted to the infill within the portico and loss of plaster and selective loss of plaster and lath. Decorative trim and window surrounds, as well as the majority of windows, were able to be retained as part of that remediation measure. This is a bit of an unusual nomination, as research revealed that the history of the house needed to be rewritten. Jordan Sorensen and Elizabeth Hull are authors of the nomination and are here to help answer any questions you may have. I will also note that the homeowners, have been waiting to apply to the Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program to help with the repairs for that fire. And the house needs to be designated before they can proceed.
Thank you. Any questions from council members?
Beth Burgess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
Go ahead, Beth. No. You go first.
Okay. Marina, you mentioned that this is a new or revised narrative to the nomination. Could someone speak to the change that was made?
Sure, I can speak a little bit to it, and then if Jordan and Elizabeth can hop in. So there was what appears to have been a previous structure on the property built by a New York doctor and his wife. Although the theme of significance is very similar, they purchased it because it was a developing area for wealthy recreation, for upper middle class or wealthy individuals. However, Jordan was able to find through deed conveyance that in 1901 the parcel was sold following the death of the doctor to Henry E. Russell, who is a very prominent industrialist. He primarily lived in New Britain, and then following his retirement, he moved to New London, and he had vacationed there during summers and was so taken with the area that he purchased the parcel and contracted James Sweeney to build him a neoclassical estate at the crest of the hill, commanding views of the harbor. And Jordan was also able to find not only, this kind of description within the newspaper articles, because it was very it was big news both in New Britain and in New London. And she was actually, if you saw in the nomination, was able to find a photo of the house as it was nearing completion. So all of that information necessitated a rewriting because there was kind of a discrepancy between who actually built the house, because there were two houses and they were constructed so closely together with one another that there was some confusion. But Jordan was able to, find photographic evidence, which was great.
Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Sarah?
Thank you, Tom. So this isn't a question so much as an observation and maybe a request that something can be expanded in the nomination write-up. I'm looking at the city map and I'm looking at the aerial photograph and the relative and proportional size of the land surrounding the house to the house. And in fact, the nomination alludes to the fact that it's on a large site. And I always think about 50 years down the road, 75 years down the road, when there's future development. And I wanted to just ask if the nomination can be expanded to discuss the proportional relationship between the land and the house. So in other words, if somebody were to buy up the rest of the land and kind of build houses, does the house still retain its significance, or is there a certain amount of space around it that helps it sort of telegraph the grandeur that it had when it was built?
No, I agree. We could certainly expand that. And then also to Tom's earlier point about having more description about the landscape, the nomination alludes to mature vegetation. So perhaps identifying all of those. We haven't found any evidence so far that details that there was a landscape plan, but being able to, identify those plantings and the boundaries of the current property as it is. The nomination also alludes that, there was a subdivision in the mid-20th century where that lower portion, the western portion of the property had been parceled off. But this current property, which is about 2 acres, we could certainly identify that and flesh it out. Also alluding to the landscape features.
Great, thank you.
So I would like to ask a question before I pass the baton to Leah. If we approve the nomination and we don't identify the landscape, let me rephrase that. If we embellish the application, the nomination to include the landscape and the present boundaries, does that prevent future subdivision of the property and therefore lose the context that we have today?
No, so listing, listing on the state register is primarily honorary, and the property is being listed under criterion 1. So it's not being listed specifically for its design, either in landscape or architectural design. It's listed for, that it's an important event in history, a trend and a pattern of this development of the community. But having that documentation, regardless, would be beneficial, both to know, what was present at this moment in time, even if it was ever subdivided. It would certainly not delist the property or make the property ineligible.
So the nomination is really for the architecture, is what you're saying?
No, the nomination is not for the architecture. The nomination, we reference the architecture, but the nomination is primarily for the development of the area. This prominent industrialist who purchases this lot to build a symbol of his industrial prominence, not so much the architecture. We do make reference to James Sweeney because James Sweeney is a prolific architect, but when it comes to listing things for architecture, James Sweeney has some very good examples that are still extant in New London. And so when we list things primarily for their architecture, we like to see that integrity to be very, very intact. This house has a lot of wonderful features. You've seen the mosaic floors, you've seen the moldings, you've seen, and the majority of its massing is still very easily read from the front of the house. But because there were some alterations like the top half of that portico being infilled, we really couldn't make that pure argument solely for architecture. However, James Sweeney's involvement in building it was still important in the development of this area of New London, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll let Leah go and then I'll come back. Go ahead, Leah.
Hi. Yeah. So I totally get that this is not nominated under the architecture, but what's really cool about this building and what I was a double major in history and art history, so I love when these things connect, and the whole idea of Russell being attached to this house and the fact that the Russell and Irwin were famous for all this fancy hardware. I was just wondering if there was any hardware left in the house, or if there was, I mean, I would assume he would have put his own stuff in his house, and maybe, and if there is, maybe just talk about that connection a little bit. You know, if you just like Google Russell and Irwin hardware, you just see amazing designs, and so it would be cool to make that connection between the occupant manufacturer and his house.
Yeah, that would be great. I actually have one Russell and Irwin doorknob left in my house, which I am very proud of, and I don't let anybody open that door. Maybe Elizabeth can speak to a little bit about the hardware, but I actually don't believe that, you know, any of those really, you know, ornate cast pieces were in the house. It could be because the house was in the neoclassical style, and so those types of ornaments were really restricted more to that late 19th century, you know, eclectic, high Gothic type of styles, you know, rather than that early 20th century design that James Sweeney did. But Elizabeth, please feel free if you happen to notice that there were any sort of really high relief hinges or doorknobs.
To my memory, there were not. There were certainly original, there was original hardware. It's been a while since I've been in the house, admittedly, so I cannot speak to that for certain.
But Leah, that's something that we can certainly double check.
Yeah, that would be cool. I would think the owners
Yeah.
would know. Yeah. So
yeah.
Thanks.
And Marina, if it does exist, please add photographs.
Oh, of the doorknobs and hinges, of course. You know,
yeah.
That's most of my much of my photograph collection already, Tom. So I'll just add it to it.
Walter, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it was unclear to me reading through whether Henry Russell was married at the time he built the house.
Oh, that's a great story, Walt. He was married at the time. The reason we did not include a woman's name is because we're still kind of working through that, because he was married at the time. His wife passed away, and he lived with his housekeeper for about 20 years. And then he married said housekeeper when he was approximately 62 and she was 40, and they lived another 20 years together in the house. He passed away in the house at the age of 82. So very interesting story. You know, we were trying to figure out how best to work it in, but we can certainly include that perhaps as a footnote or discussion of, you know, his family life within the house, because he had already retired by the time he decided to purchase the land and build the house. So it wasn't, you know, the
Do you have
family
any
was
sense
grown.
of whether the housekeeper had any influence on the design or selection? I'm wondering whether, because of their relationship, she or the ex-wife or someone would warrant inclusion in the listing.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we can certainly look into that, and we can add that, especially spell out the two separate wives.
Excellent. That sounds great.
I told you this is a very unusual property and a very interesting history. It's quite an interesting property.
Exciting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions from council members? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the nomination. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber?
Aye.
Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Christine Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
Sarah Sportman?
Aye.
Walter Woodward?
Aye.
Ellen Zappo?
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Christine's here, I think.
Was that to me? If that was to me, I did not catch it.
Yeah, I think Christine's in the lobby. I don't know who can let her in.
Oh.
We're having technical difficulties
Oh,
for
okay.
some reason. It's not letting us admit her, but she is participating by phone now. So.
Okay. Great.
Sorry, I had to call in.
The next item on the agenda is item 7A, Local Historic Study Report. Pursuant to CGS 7-147 QC, the Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance and boundary for 90 Poplar Road, Ridgefield, Connecticut, as presented in the study report transmitted by the Ridgefield Historic District Commission and dated September 20th, 2021. Says here the study report was received on the September 20th, 2021 and is technically complete. Staff recommends a positive recommendation from the Historic Preservation Council. May I have a motion to move the item to the table for discussion?
This is Sarah Nelson.
Sorry.
All right. Deborah, we'll give that to Sarah Nelson. And a second?
Margaret.
God.
And we'll give that to Margaret Cornell, Deborah. All right.
Thank you.
And the discussion.
Okay,
Mary, is that
so
you?
This one's mine. As you know, you just voted to list 2 properties on the state register. Under state statute 7147, or 7147 is the state enabling legislation that allows local municipalities to determine resources of local architectural and or historical significance. And part of that process is developing this study report and submitting it to their local planning and zoning, as well as the Department of Economic and Community Development, but specifically SHPO and more specifically Historic Preservation Council. We have 65 days to respond. And so that's why the date of receipt is noted, so that we know that we're within statutory requirements. But the charge per statute is not really voting, because it's a local ordinance that actually designates this property. But I mean, you are voting to recommend the ordinance and boundaries as submitted in the study report. But we also expect and encourage any comments that you want to submit regarding the study report. And such comments will be addressed at a public meeting prior to the final local legislative vote that actually lists to put it or to make it a locally designated historic resource. And I'm just saying all this because a lot of council members are new, and I think this is the first study report that you've received. So unlike National Register, which the State Review Board handles and makes recommendations and actually votes to send it to the Park Service, and State Register, which actually results in an instant listing on the State Register, we are just per statute part of the process of making comments and recommendations. And since this is a local property, the boundary is pretty straightforward. But any other comments or suggestions you have will be transmitted in a letter to the town. Phil Esser was here, but I believe he had to leave early. But Dan O'Brien, I think, is still here, who's the chair of the Historic District Commission in Ridgefield.
Great.
So
Thank you, Mary. And, thanks for that explanation, because that was my first question. What is this all about? Where's it going? So I appreciate that. Questions from council members?
So Mary, can you clarify? So it's given a local designation, subject to local reviews. They would then have to go as a subsequent application through SHPO to be placed on the state register. There's no automatic listing once it's designated as a local.
Yeah, that is correct. Prior to March of 2018, which Marina?
19.
19? Really?
19.
Okay. So prior to that, anything that was listed or anything that received a favorable recommendation from the Historic Preservation Council for either a locally designated property or district was automatically listed on the state register. However, because a study report is different than a nomination, a state register nomination, sometimes additional information would be required. So we made the policy switch to requiring a separate step to actually have it listed on the state register. And in fact, the motion used to be that, a favorable recommendation will automatically list this on the state register, but that's obviously not part of the motion anymore.
So in order to be eligible for any preservation funding through SHPO, they would have to go through that secondary process of actually submitting a nomination.
Yes, and that is why any comments or recommendations you have today would be very helpful should they decide to move forward with a state register nomination, because they could incorporate any recommendations or concerns.
So that way you get the carrot and not just the stick.
Yeah. Well, right. However, in this case, since it's a local property, the owners are interested in this. And in fact, under the local property legislation, it requires a public hearing, but then the owner has 30 days to object in writing if they don't want it listed. But generally, the town wouldn't go around trying to designate properties if the owner was not in favor. But so they probably, I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to come in for a state register application.
Thank you.
Mary, a follow-up question to that. It's Beth Ackley. Given that sometimes these can funnel into a state nomination, is there an encouragement for the study reports to be structured in a similar way with the different criterion and things like that?
We actually can't, because the statutes require a specific type of report. Now, granted, most of that would be included in state register. I mean, architectural significance, historical significance, photos, things like that. Yeah. But because this is actually a statutory process, the state register nomination itself is not the appropriate vehicle for this process.
Fair enough. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Mary, this is Sarah. Just, I think you kind of mentioned this, but just for the council members who are new. So this enabling legislation that the historic property comes under is historic properties and historic district commissions. So yes. It's its own animal.
Right. Right. This is the legislation that, since it goes under a local ordinance, it becomes subject to exterior review of changes or changes to architectural features that are visible from a public way.
Mary, this is Christine Nelson, excuse me. In terms of notification of the study having been done and being put on the local list, are there notifications that are made standard, like listing or giving notice to the building official, or putting something on the land records for future property owners to become aware?
That is a great question. There's nothing in the enabling legislation that provides for that process. It really deals with the designation and then the administration. But obviously that's an ongoing concern, because yes, the properties will be listed in a local ordinance, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it ends up on the land records. And so, because this is municipal enabling legislation and our part is really just sort of advisory, but really just comment, we don't have control over that part. We can only encourage municipalities to see that connect. Now, a lot of municipalities have lists, that may not be on the land records so that a prospective buyer would know, but obviously the building official is aware of what properties come under the ordinance. And so if a building permit comes in, the building department would be able to say, oops, you need a certificate of appropriateness before I can give you this building permit. I mean, that's how it's working in most of the municipalities and how it should.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
well, having first worked in one where things sometimes
Yep.
institutional knowledge wasn't continuous. One of the things that we did that I don't know if we can work it into this was we actually put a notice on the land records of all the properties that were locally significant and within historic districts, just so that real estate agents would know and subsequent owners wouldn't make mistakes. But the other thing we did was we asked the assessor's office to put in the notes of their property, their field cards, just that they were listed or whatever, just to give an extra heads up to everybody. Maybe that's just a recommendation we can send along, or do you think
Definitely.
that's not appropriate? Okay.
Yep.
Christine, I really like that, because if we think about our SEPA applications, that's the first question we ask. Did you know the property was listed?
Right.
Or, has significance?
I did the same thing with scenic roads. I put a list on the land records that would come up within any title search, so that people wouldn't inadvertently take down trees and stone walls.
Right. Dan O'Brien, I see your hand is up.
Hello? Yeah.
Hello, Dan. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mary. I just want to address the last question with respect to the land records. We already have 3 properties similar to this that are designated as local historic properties that are under the purview of the Historic District Commission. And in each case, once it is approved by all parties, we then go to the town clerk and give them the information to put on the land records, and they're all properly recorded. And we have, and certainly the building department is notified, and along with the planning and zoning enforcement officer. So everyone will be on board with that, and it'll be well protected.
Right.
Terrific. Thank you.
Paul, I see you have your hand up.
I think that might be a leftover.
Okay. Mary, are there any other questions from council members? So Mary, I have a very simple question for you. Why in the paperwork we were given that I read off, does it say that this is technically complete? Why is that specific phrase in there?
I think, well, I put that there just to ensure, in the statute, there are specific things that are required. And so it's just to give the council assurance that everything that's in the report has been transmitted, so that there's no, glitch in the, if you were to comment on a report that wasn't complete, it might, start the ball rolling again. We just want to make sure that all the ducks are in a row before you provide comment. So that's just a little heads up that says everything's there.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other final questions from council members?
Hi, Tom. This is Marguerite. It's not a question. It's really just a comment. Very interesting report, interesting property. And I would encourage the town to pursue having this property listed on the state register as well, including aspects of the landscape, which could be interesting, some of the family history. This might be a good time to do it before it leaves family hands.
Yeah. Great, Mark. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments? So then we have a motion for favorable recommendation for the ordinance and boundaries as presented. Beth Ackley.
Aye.
Beth Burgess.
Aye.
Paul Butkus.
Aye.
Marguerite Cornell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Margaret Faber.
Aye.
Leah Glazer.
Aye.
Christine Nelson.
Aye.
Sarah Nelson.
Aye.
Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Walter Woodward.
Aye.
Ellen Zappo.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is number 9, threatened properties. Todd with an update.
Good morning, folks. I have an update on Bridgewater. This is something that started in 2018. It actually started in 2016 when we started working with the municipality when we heard about the threatened building. It was referred to the Attorney General's office in 2018, and we've been working to find a compromise. The Attorney General's office and the first selectman, Curtis Reed, had reached an agreement on Monday of this week to list the building with Preservation Connecticut's Historic Preservation Exchange, where they list threatened properties, for 2 months. We had requested 6 months, but they only were able to work out 2. The municipality is simply just receiving inquiries and offers. They are under no obligation to accept any offers. And after the period of time, which is 2 months after it's listed with the Historic Preservation Exchange, Historic Properties Exchange rather, then if they don't make a deal with a buyer, they can take it down. So it's not a very good deal, but I think there was concern at the Attorney General's office level of being able to prove that this is a prudent and feasible alternative after all the things we've done. This has been going on, for over 5 years, and we've done a lot of stuff. Early on, we worked hard with, Beth was involved, Beth Ackley was involved doing a structural analysis. We have Dave Gosling from Kroski Engineering work with us and the owner to actually have them keep and rehab the building. Then that fell through. Then COVID hit. And then they decided they want to knock it down. We brought in a nonprofit organization who was going to come in themselves and do the rehab. That got shot down from a town referendum. So there's a lot of effort going through this so far. And unfortunately, I don't think going to court was going to be a success. So this is where we kind of ended up. We'll find out. Certainly, I think if there's an overwhelming offer to the municipality, there is a potential that it could still be saved, but that remains to be seen. Any questions about Bridgewater? And then lastly, Norwalk, which was referred earlier this year. I think I said last month that they the owner intends to demo after all, and we're working with the Attorney General's office to determine if there's going to be a suit or not. One solution is a variance. A variance would allow them to keep the historic portions of the main facade, A and B side, intact while building new behind it. The town has expressed concern that the building might fall if they were to do demo and just keep the A and B sides, and they would have to get a variance. The owner said he doesn't want a variance. The municipality has offered concern about a variance being awarded, but a variance would keep the historic fabric on the A and B side intact. So the Attorney General's office is in discussions with SHPO and the municipality on whether that is a prudent and feasible alternative. So more to come by next month. Any questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Next item on the agenda is number 11, a report on State Historic Preservation Office. Jonathan?
Good morning, everyone. Just a few quick bullets for you this morning. I continue to participate in the working group regarding the protection and preservation of historic properties, which is investigating ways to support and facilitate municipalities and nonprofit efforts to preserve historic resources. To that end, I'd very much like to solicit the input of council to be taken into consideration as we move forward with that project. So I wanted to invite the members of council to send me any examples you may have of interesting, effective, or creative tools or programs that you may have seen at the local or nonprofit level. You just shoot me an email. I'd be happy to discuss those further with you. And on the flip side, anything that you think doesn't exist in Connecticut that we could use, any funding gaps that you're aware of or programs that could be changed or improved, we would also like to hear about those as we're trying to get as much input as we can as we move forward with that effort. The second thing I have is based on feedback from council at earlier meetings and with the assistance of other members of the SHPO staff. Erin Fink has been working incredibly hard over the past several months on some exciting changes to the HRF grant program, which have been sent to you. and which we hope will streamline the application and review process. And Erin will be talking about those in a few minutes. So I hope you're pleased with what you see there. The third item I have is something that goes back to earlier this year, and that is the map that we had produced of all of our grant projects, and that goes from fiscal year 18 to 21. That map is now live and up on our website, and I'll put the link to it in the chat here in a second. But council can, I'd encourage council members to go to check out the map. You can see the fruits of all your labor over the past several years, and these are all the grants that have been awarded through most of our grant programs. Like I said, I'll put the link in the chat. And finally, just a quick report on SHPO staff. SHPO staff continues to telework primarily, coming into the office as needed, with several staff members now splitting their time between remote and in-office work. We anticipate that will be the case at least until the end of the calendar year, when we hope to have future update for you. The entire SHPO staff continues to do exemplary work across all of our programs, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge their accomplishments and to thank them for their work. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Great. Next on the agenda is number 12, the report on museum properties. Liz?
Hi, everybody. A little bit of an update, some fun things. As I mentioned at the last meeting, members of the museum staff traveled to Little Rock, Arkansas in mid-September to attend and to present a session at the conference entitled Reinterpreting Reinterpretation, Challenging Traditional Reinterpretation Processes While Rewriting an Inclusive Narrative. It's a little wordy. It wasn't my title, but they liked it. Although only 300 people attended the entire in-person conference, they're going to have a fully virtual conference next week. We did have about 35 people attend our session, which is a fairly substantial number. And by the comments that we received after the session and the evaluations and through the rest of the conference when people were grabbing staff members, attendees seemed to think it provided valuable information they could use. And we're going to be presenting the session again, slightly changed because we've learned some better things about how we can improve it during this November's virtual NEMA conference. And Tom, I know you had asked if that session would be recorded. It was not recorded by the conference, and we were kind of unable to record it in the moment just because of sort of the craziness, but we'd be happy to present. Staff said to tell you guys that they'd be happy to present an abridged version, but I think it will be recorded at the NEMA conference, and so we may be able to share that with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. It looks like we're in the final steps. I say this a lot, but really in the final steps needed to post the curatorial position that became empty when Mike McBride retired from the Henry Whitfield Museum. Just as I noted, I will absolutely share a link to that posting when it goes live. It's currently being reviewed by EEO, which is the last step. I had hoped it would be live last Friday, but HR has had some staff changes that sort of delayed things. And then I will send it out for you to share. And as a note, we're specifically looking for a curator. That is the job title that we can fill, but who has extensive experience with developing school programs. So we're sort of looking for a curator of education, although it's not going to, I can't say that anywhere in the job posting, but you'll see by the preferred qualifications that is what we're looking for. And then a couple of interesting specifics for the museums. The ongoing restoration project at the Prudence Crandall Museum now has a substantial completion date set in mid-November. Someday I'm going to tell you, after mid-November, I hope that the project is substantially complete. I will cry when I tell you that. With happiness, tears of joy. Ongoing issues that continue right now. The current issue is that the painting contractor, Kronenberger, hired, the subcontractor is just not doing a good job. So that may end up delaying the project, and it's been really frustrating. Every time there's a delay, the costs escalate, and there's nothing I can do about it. So that's very frustrating. But in the meantime, curator Joni DiMartino is going to be meeting with museum colleague Kathy Crogwell-Varda next week, and they're going to determine a plan to rehouse the collections, most of which will not be on display when the museum reopens next season, and many of which will be deaccessioned over the course of the next multiple years because they have really very little to do with the house itself. and a very small percentage of them are related to Prudence Crandall and the Prudence Crandall students and the stories. So that's an update on Prudence Crandall. Andrew Rowand, who's the site administrator at the Eric Sloan Museum, has had a number of interesting irons in the fire. The museum is going to receive a donation of several signed Eric Sloan books from a donor in Indianapolis. And we do get some signed books every now and again. But one of these is particularly neat because it is signed Everard Henricks and then crossed out and signed Eric Sloan. And for those of you who are not Sloaniacs, Everard Henricks is Sloan's real name. So that was kind of an interesting thing. We don't have one like that. So in addition to that kind of excitement, we did finally, I'd mentioned that we have some mold problems at the museum. We have new large fans in the museum, which are really quiet, and they do seem to be preventing repeated mold outbreaks. And finally, Andrew presented a session on the Sloan Museum for the all virtual Ohio Local History Alliance Conference. And he got feedback from the conference presenters that there were over 40 people in his session. And with 40, it was one of the biggest individual session turnouts of the conference and of any conference that they've had. So that was terrific. Andrew and the Sloan staff, and actually all the museums that are open, have been particularly challenged since mid-month. When we said goodbye to a seasonal, Brandon Lisi, we've actually lost 2 seasonals this year. But one, Brandon, who's been with the museum for 3 seasons, he's accepted a position at the Sharon Historical Society as the curator. So we're really proud he got launched into his museum career with our museums. So that's super exciting. Michelle Parrish at the Henry Whitfield Museum has really been leading the charge for all the museums to start and continue the deaccessioning processes, working through what that looks like at a state level, because we have to go through a traditional museum deaccessioning process as well as a state deaccessioning process. And at the same time, updating our collections policy, which we will be hopefully finished with doing over this downtime over the winter season. It has been really time consuming. And finally, and I think this is the biggest news for last, Old Newgate Prison has been the recipient of a Save America's Treasures grant of $317,000 to stabilize and create access to the remains of the 4-story cell block. That was supposed to be part of a project in the past, and it never got done. So I just want to take this moment to give a huge note of appreciation to Kathy Lapadilla, who has been lead on so many of Newgate's restoration and stabilization projects. She took the lead on this grant application when I first started, I think, and she's like, we really need to apply for this. We applied for it 3 times. I think this is the 3rd time we applied, having been turned down. Morgan Bengal, who's the site administrator there, as she grew in her skill set, assumed the lead with assistance from Kathy during the multiple application periods. But I guess the 3rd time is a charm. So we have received the grant. It's a matching grant, so we'll be providing matches from the CIA funds designated for museum projects. And I want to thank Mary Dunn, too, who's going to be sort of the project administrator for the grant and the point person with the National Park Service. And in case you somehow missed the news, I don't know how it would be possible, but the Barnum Museum's 2021 Save America's Treasures application was also successful. So all told, there were 49 projects funded in 29 states for a total of $15.5 million. So the fact that Connecticut received 2 awards this year, I think is extremely, that's over, I'm not going to do math in my head, but almost $700,000 worth of federal funds coming to really do some stabilization that is needed at both very important historic landmarks. So that's really exciting. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Liz, I have a question. It goes to the mold statement that you made at the Eric Sloan Museum. And building on Beth's question or comment about the insulation in the old Lime Arts building. Mm-hmm. Do you know where the mold is coming from, what the source is? And might it be because of this new renovation?
So yes and no. So so the collections have always had mold spores on them. So they've never been, if you've been there, they're stored in a barn. It is not an insulated storage at all. It was not meant to be. So when we had the new the renovation, one of the things that we did was there was a sort of a better ventilating system that was added. But because of the size of the building, we found that we still needed to run fans. And the fans that we had been running were just super old and super noisy. They couldn't be run when visitors were in the building. And we were wary about trusting them when no one was going to be in the building. So they were not helping. So we purchased new quiet fans so we could have them on all the time, and so that they are a little bit more trustworthy in terms of reliability and not being a hazard. So yeah, we pretty much know where it's coming from. We pretty much know what we can do within our power to mitigate it. But like everything else, when you have essentially an exhibit that, because that its integrity is that it was installed by an artist in a barn, it's really tricky to maintain control over the collections.
Great.
They were all just cleaned. They were cleaned, sort of an overview, at a low level when they were removed from the building for storage, and before they were reinstalled, they were significant. They were all cleaned. But I think just because we're in a barn, there's just no way that the mold spores are not going to transfer if this situation is right.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Erin Fink with the Historic Restoration Fund program updates.
Thank you. So the SHPO staff would like to give an update to some of the changes that have been implemented this month. So the first thing is that the cap for the grant has been raised from $100,000 to $200,000 to reflect the rise in construction costs and materials. The applications will be accepted on a quarterly basis in March, September, and December, and we have an existing deadline that will be this November 5th as well. A preservation plan template has been created by staff and will be required for each applicant. So I did attach that in the email. A list of eligible projects has been created and the need for supporting documents has been outlined. So you can see a list of those on our website, and I also attached the list to your email. The application and review process will be completed online using the SurveyMonkey Apply platform, which is just so great, and I'm so happy about that. And the ownership and eligibility requirements remain the same. The grants are available to nonprofits and municipalities with buildings listed on the state or national register. So if you don't mind, I was going to share my screen briefly to show you what the online application system looks like, just so you can get an idea. And
Erin, while you're pulling that up, quick question for you. Were you the one that sent out the email with the SurveyMonkey? Because I did not open it because I didn't know who it was from.
Yes, that was me. So you don't have to do anything with it right now. I just set everybody up with their email addresses, so it'll be your username going forward.
Okay.
So, but I'm glad you got it. So this is the application that we send out to each applicant. You can see all of the different components. There are 10 that are required and 5 that are additional depending on the type of project they're applying for. So it's a lot of the same information that we used to require: the narrative, project information, scope of work, budget, those types of things. But it's really nice because you can see you can download templates right in the application and re-upload them. You can save it and come back to it. And then there's also the ability to add a collaborator to the application. Eventually, I will send you all instructions for how to review the application, but it's as simple as logging onto this platform. And when you pull up the answers to from the applicants, they'll be on one side and your review will be on the other side. So you can type questions right into a text box there. So it's really easy to use and download all of the application materials so we can save them. And eventually I'll be able to put contracts and closeout documents and everything right in this system. So these are all to reflect, yay, changes that that were brought up at the July 7th meeting when we reviewed that last sort of bulk of applications. So hopefully these address those concerns and edits that were suggested. So that's it for my show and tell. I'll stop sharing my screen.
So before I open it up to questions for council, Erin, do you want to dive into this now, or do you want to do a subcommittee offline discussion like we did last time? How would you like input from us?
I think I would, if you could email me some of your questions or edits, that would be best so I can have a record of all of them. And then afterwards I can compile those and we can meet with a subcommittee if that works for you.
Okay. That works for me, but I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that. So I see Beth Ackley's hand up.
I'm not on the subcommittee, and so this was, I mean, I knew this was all happening, but this is my first time seeing any specifics, and I love it. I think, you know, keeping people in their lane is going to make the process, you know, the standard questions that that come up so often, you know, those are sort of automatically funneled in, which is super great. And I can also email this sort of comment to you, and you might have already thought of this and addressed it anyway, but when I've used programs like this in the past, like to submit an application for a paper or whatever, I've used a few different platforms, and the ones that I found were super helpful were the ones that I had received like a PDF copy of what the questions were before. So it was just easy to prepare them ahead, because sometimes, you know, there's a certain period of time to gather all of the information, and maybe I would do it in a separate document and cut and paste it. But people may, as they're applying, want to try to get that information to do it. So if you had that PDF sort of prepared with instructions, as long as it had big letters like "this is not the application" on it, that might be helpful. So that's just a comment, but just big kudos. This is really great. I think this will be a huge asset to everything you guys do.
Thank you.
I second that, Erin, and this is Leah. And if you want a model, I'm currently trying to work on my daughter's FAFSA application, federal aid form, and it's very similar, I think, in terms of what Beth was just talking about. Like, they give you a PDF so that you know what you need before you go in and start filling out all that stuff. And then, yeah, and how they yell at you that this is, you don't use this, and stuff like that. Anyway.
All right, I'll definitely do that.
One other comment, Erin. Also, the ability to jump around between questions. Some survey or forms like this lock you out. You cannot proceed to the next screen unless you answer the last question. And to Beth's point of having that format beforehand, so you can kind of fill things out, or have the ability to save it mid-process, come back to it later. That it doesn't all have to be entered at one setting. Those are all kind of very important user-friendly kind of things, and say, okay, at the very end, here's my submission. It's done. Got everything. So if that's the way it works, that's great.
That's how this application works, and I'll also send out the PDF. So you can bounce around, work on it for a whole month, and then when you're finally ready, you can submit it.
Terrific.
Just to let everybody know that it wasn't like picked from nothing. So the Office of the Arts started, we needed an online grants platform. We needed to upgrade our grants platform. So we started looking back in 2019, and we chose and adopted SurveyMonkey Apply, starting in we started work in January of 2020. And then everything kind of went to hell. And so we had to learn to use this platform all virtually working together. And I will say that, so we've been using it now since that time, and it's learning curve, but it's great. And I will just say, Erin, We literally gave her credentials. She may have talked to art staff once or twice. She totally figured out how to use it all on her own, and hopefully it's going to work, because the Office of the Arts pays for essentially unlimited use of this grants platform. And if SHPO can be using it, we are getting a bargain, because these things are not, they're fairly expensive. So very excited about this, and big kudos to Erin for just like, I'll learn it. Don't worry, Liz. And okay.
Great. Walter, I see your hands up.
Are applicants able to enter images as well as text in the boxes?
Yes. So I'll show, oh, my screen's not still sharing. Yes, so you can upload as many photos as you'd like. They have, I just put some, just ideas like please upload the front of the building, back of building. And so they can do all these different uploads right on the page there.
So can they, is it WYSIWYG? Can they kind of place it where they want to place it? Context is often really helpful in understanding what's going on.
Unfortunately, no, there's just one section to put, well, I guess I could change it around so that in the narrative section, they could add some photos too. So it's just as easy as sort of dragging and dropping the ability to upload. So I suppose for each section, I could add the ability to upload photos and just make it optional.
Well, you may not need one in each section, but there are some places where people normally do include images. So that might be a good one for those particular boxes.
Great idea. I'll do that.
Any other questions from other council members?
These are still matching grants, right?
Yes.
It's required matching.
1-to-1 matching.
I have one last quick question. When you guys met as a subcommittee, or maybe you guys have already done this, in SHPO yourselves, but has anybody defined, and does this program define a long-term preservation plan? And how it might be different from, say, a conditions assessment? Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. Yep, I remember seeing that. Yeah.
So staff all agreed on this. I annoyed them at lots and lots of staff meetings so that we could come up with it. So we have the features here. We tried to just go interior to exterior, describe it, the integrity, and then sort of, when the work was last completed, current condition, recommended repairs, and priority level. I've done about 6 different pre-application meetings, and I don't know if they were just being nice, but the applicants were saying how helpful this was because they hadn't really put this much thought into their building, and a lot of the organizations have a lot of turnover, so they'll be able to have this document to hand to the next person, or they can dig it up and know when those repairs happened.
That's really great. I love it.
Tom, this is Sarah. I've got one comment going back to Erin's first request. And Erin, this is marvelous to have all of this put together with all the thought that's gone into it. So kudos for doing all of this legwork. The comment that I wanted to just go back to, where you said you welcome council members to put comments together, email them to you in advance. And I'm happy to do that. But a lot of these comments that I have are not necessarily things that you can check off. It's what's your intention here? And it's more of a conversation. And I'll just give 4 examples. So itemized budget includes materials, labor, 15% contingency. And my comment is that if you're looking for a specific breakdown between materials and labor, it's hard for non-contractors to do. And if you're still saying that contractors who put together the budgets or involved in the formulation of these applications can't bid on it, then that would mean that you probably want to make the budget something that an architect can do based on historical benchmarks with escalation. So they're nuanced questions that are sort of at different times you can sort of plug in different answers, but that's what I just wanted to say, because I do have comments like that, and I'm sure other people do too. So I would really welcome an opportunity to talk with you as you're working through them.
That would be great. I think the idea, we were thinking that applicants would get some unofficial quotes to use as budget justification. They wouldn't create their proposals around the scope of work that was provided, but they would have a ballpark number to use for their budget. So we can talk about that depending on how you want to schedule a call. I'll leave it up to the council.
Sarah, do you have anything else that's quick?
There's a lot of little comments like that, but it's 11:45.
Okay.
Tom, and I'm realizing the time is moving on, so I don't drag everybody through conversation, but there may be Beth and Paul would certainly probably have comments as well.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is, Aaron, let's get together and figure out when, or maybe I send out an email to the group and find out who is interested in being involved and how we hook up with you to give you some additional input.
Great.
Okay.
I'll look out for your.
All right. Thank you. Walter, you have your hand up. Do you have something?
I have forget to put your hand down.
All right. Very good. Aaron, thank you so much. It looks great.
Thanks.
The next item on the agenda is liaison with public and private agencies. Is Jane Montanaro still with us?
Good morning, everyone. Hi, it's Jane. I just have one announcement for you all. You may recall under the circuit rider contract for this year, we were adding a position for an archaeologist in the field. And so that position has been posted, and I encourage you all to share it with your groups. We have the posting open until October 22nd, and then we'll be conducting interviews through the month of November. And I hope by the end of November to be able to announce a new field service representative in the field.
Great. Good luck.
Thank you.
Next, Mary Favi.
Yes, hello everyone. Not much to report from Connecticut Preservation Action, but we will be gearing up. The legislative session will be upon us before we know it. So if anyone has any suggestions for legislation or concerns that you would like to have, please let us know. I'll put my email in the chat for you.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Next item on the agenda is public forum. Are there any members of the public that would like to address council? Okay, hearing none. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021, 9:30. Presumably it will again be on a Teams online meeting. Then the final item is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Come on.
So moved, Tom. It's Beth.
Okay. And second?
Marguerite, second.
Very good. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time and your input. See you next
Bye,
month.
everybody.
And I will reach out about the subcommittee.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.